Hello and welcome to A Deeper Dive with Dara Kam. Today we'll be taking a deep dive into Florida's August 23rd primary elections with special guest Jim Rosica, Editor-in-Chief of City and State Florida. Jim and I will take a deep dive into the August 23rd elections, talking about who's in, who's out, and what's coming up. Stick with us.
So speaking of disabusing people of things, can we now disabuse people of the notion that Florida is still a purple state?
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by City and State Florida.
Hello and welcome to A Deeper Dive with me, Dara Kam. And my special guest this morning is Jim Rosica, the Editor-in-Chief of City and State Florida. That is the sister organization, sister publication of my shop, News Service of Florida. No, he's making a face already. So what did I get wrong?
I think you got everything right.
Okay.
I think that's all accurate and good.
And listen to him; he's got such the radio voice too. So we got a lot to cover here, and we're going to wrap it all up for you and give you a heads up into what to look forward to come November and over the next few months, except for we all know there's going to be tons of mailers stuffed in our mailboxes, and we'll be seeing a lot of ads. So aside from that, let's go over some of the top wins on the August 23rd primary election on the Democrat and Republican sides. Jim, I think, to me, I thought the congressional race for the Orlando-based district, CD10, where Maxwell Alejandro Frost defeated 11 other candidates in the Democratic primary. You were not as taken aback by that as I was. I guess polls kind of showed that he was ahead. Can you talk about that race at all?
I would completely agree with you. I was not shocked. I was not shocked as much as people. Well, maybe I guess people should be shocked these days because polls in the last few years have so often been wrong.
That's what I'm saying.
But I think they were. I mean, they clearly were right in this case. That I hate to bring up my old friend the Magic 8-Ball, but all the signs seem to point to Maxwell Frost in that race, and there he is out on top. And obviously, the conventional line on him now is that should he win the general election, which again he is expected to do, he will be. It's like every cycle we have. Oh, this person is the youngest member of Congress ever. I think, pretty soon we're going to have to amend the Constitution and just start electing 16-year-olds so we can keep, trending downward in age. Maxwell
Frost is 25 years old. He quit his job at working for March for Our Lives, the organization that was founded after the horrific school massacre at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland. He Ubered to make ends meet while he was campaigning over the summer. So he is a Gen Z. I mean, he is real Gen Z. And he's Florida's first real Gen Z elected official into Congress. We don't have one in the legislature, I don't think. Maybe, I don't know. Emily Schlossberg may be too old now to be Gen Z. I'm not sure.
Well, I think the youngest ones in the legislature were Josie Tomko, I think.
Okay.
I think she held the title for a while.
Right.
I don't know if she still does.
Okay. Well, certainly he is Florida's first Gen Z congressional member. So very, very progressive, worked for the ACLU's, community organizer, got the endorsement of many, many progressive national figures, including Elizabeth Warren. On the Republican side, what would you say would be the equivalent to the Maxwell Alejandro Frost election on the Republican side? Would that be Corey Mills?
Corey Mills won the seat that obviously firebrand conservative state representative Anthony Sabatini was running for. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. CD7. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but that kind of feeds into the whole conversational theme of, when does running to the right go too far? When does running to the right backfire? And maybe we can get into this a little bit later in the podcast, but obviously it worked for some people. Remember, I wouldn't say Corey Mills is any less conservative than Anthony Sabatini, and he won.
Right.
But also more conservative people among Republican candidates in other races did not win. Case in point, I would say Kelly Stargell in CD15, who, along with State Representative Jackie Toledo of Tampa, lost to the now former Florida Secretary of State Laurel Lee, who actually quit her job as Secretary of State to run for this congressional seat and won the primary on Tuesday, and again is expected to take it all in November.
Yeah, everyone has said that about that race, and Tampa Bay race. I think that includes Hillsborough, Pasco, and Polk counties. So it really isn't that much of a surprise to me, just geographically, that Kelly Stargell didn't win in that race. But Laurel Lee, I'm not sure why people think of her as a moderate. She worked for a firebrand Republican governor who is, by some people's standards, Governor DeSantis is Trumpier than Trump.
I think she benefited from the DeSantis glow.
The DeSantis glow.
But I never really, throughout all of the time that I knew of her, including as a circuit judge in Hillsborough County, and obviously you can't really tell, although these days you can kind of sort of tell, judges' political leanings, did not perceive her as DeSantis. I think she is much more of an old school establishment Republican who maybe gets a reputation for being DeSantis-y because she was appointed by DeSantis. And hey, look, you're appointed by DeSantis. You're going to be a loyal person to your guy and follow the program. And that's what she did. I'll certainly credit her for that.
Yeah, she also is very kind of, and I'm not saying this in a pejorative way, but she is very soft-spoken. She's an intellectual, as you say. She was a judge. She is a lawyer. She's much more. I feel like she's a little more circumspect in her demeanor, maybe, than some of the legislators who you see. There's clips of them. You can see them arguing for their cases. They're not cases literally, but arguing their points in clips from the legislature. And I don't know. I just think she maybe had a little bit of a softer edge to her than her opponent.
I will tell you exactly who Laurel Lee reminded me of when I covered her as Secretary of State is Rick Scott, in the sense of she shares with Rick Scott in terms of a public persona, very scripted, very adhering to the script. Never sounds like she's speaking extemporaneously or off the cuff or off the top of her head. It always sounds as though everything she said was written out beforehand and vetted.
Yes.
And she saw it and read it and studied it, and like a lawyer arguing your brief.
Yes.
You know what's in your brief. You know what you're going to say. the only surprise comes when a judge asks you a question in oral argument. But that's not the case in this venue. You're giving a public statement to a bunch of reporters, and you're going to adhere to a bunch of talking points. And that's, quite frankly, that's the safe thing to do. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, is know what you're going to say. Don't veer from the talking points, and don't get yourself in trouble.
Well, except and maybe that's the safe thing to do, and maybe that was the downfall of President Trump. I mean, certainly he never did that, and I think to some extent Governor DeSantis doesn't follow that playbook either. Although, except that he is very well prepared, he's very knowledgeable about the issues. But he does sometimes just shoot from the hip. I mean, he says he's not as scripted in that sense. He doesn't come out and espouse. Maybe they are bullet points, but his delivery of them makes it appear as if they're much more spontaneous.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. I think he is probably in a sense as scripted as anyone is, but he has a talent of speaking in a way that sounds as though he's just talking to somebody that he met in the pharmacy or the grocery store. It's like, hey,
at the ball game,
and he's telling you what he thinks, and he's answering your questions, and it doesn't sound scripted or prepared. Although we know it is, because he says the same things and he hammers on the same issues. Absolutely.
And he uses almost the identical language.
Absolutely.
At press conference after press conference after press conference.
But his talent is he sounds natural.
Very natural.
He sounds like a natural.
All right. Well, he's going to be on the ballot later this year, and he'll be facing off against Charlie Crist. So let's talk about the gubernatorial Democratic, which I can't believe we didn't lead with. Sorry, my bad.
We got to it eventually.
So Charlie Crist defeated Nikki Fried. I guess the reason that I didn't lead with that, Jim, is because to me I was not as surprised by that. That seemed to me to be almost a given. Tell me how I'm wrong. I
don't know that I can tell you that you're wrong. I mean, who among us in the political or lobby or press corps, honestly, in their heart of hearts, expected that there was going to be an upset on Tuesday night of Nikki Fried over Charlie Crist? I mean, if you're out there, please let me know, because I did not hear from you in the last few months that you thought that upset was going to happen, because I did not hear that.
Charlie, we call him Charlie because that's just how we've called him. And Charlie handily defeated Nikki Fried, who's left her now, doesn't have a job as agriculture commissioner anymore. And she made a lot about being the state's only statewide elected Democrat. And she made abortion a big part of her platform, and kind of showed how Charlie Crist had morphed on that issue, other issues. And just couldn't bring that didn't resonate with voters. I have written a story about this and talked to other analysts and experts, politicos, and everyone has said to me that Democratic voters on August 23rd were looking for the person that they thought was best suited to defeat Governor DeSantis in November. And that's why Charlie got the kind of support that he did. True or false?
I think true. Also, adding a couple of notes to what you previously said, she'll still be the only statewide elected Democratic official until January.
That's right.
But I have to point out that I saw State Representative Spencer Roach tweeted probably Tuesday night or Wednesday morning. Can the media now retire the phrase "only statewide Democratic elected official"? So
January, whatever the inauguration.
I was going to say, I said to myself, yes, we'll do that in January. But that just gives you a snippet of how happy the Republican establishment is to see Nikki go, in the sense that she will not be governor. She will not be the state's agriculture commissioner after January, and I think all we know now about her future plans, political future, is that she is going to be behind some effort to put abortion rights specifically in the state constitution. I know I read that somewhere.
Well, she was a thorn in Governor DeSantis' side as the state's, let's say it again, lone statewide elected Democrat. And she used that position as a bully pulpit to hammer him on his handling of COVID, on spending, school lunch money, refusing federal money for school lunches. I'm not sure if I got that exactly straight or not, but I know that was an issue for her. And so she, in a little twist, which, I don't know if this was a passive aggressive or an outright aggressive little move or whatever, but the governor scheduled the cabinet meeting, the cabinet meeting for August, which I shouldn't say for August, one of the very, very few cabinet meetings that the governor and cabinet have held this year.
The first one after March.
The first one after March on, you guessed it, August 23rd.
Primary election day.
Yeah.
Well, you know what he said?
What did he say?
He said, well, 3 of us up here didn't have primary elections we had to worry about, so I figured it was as good a day as any.
So
that's not an exact quote, by the way, but
passive aggressive, overly aggressive, just a little bit of the I'm the boss.
He knew what he was doing.
I did it because
he
I
is.
can.
Ron
yes.
is the boss. Please don't disabuse yourself of the fact that when push comes to shove, yes, Ron is the boss.
So a handful of incumbent legislators lost their bids for re-election.
Oh my gosh, who?
Well, Representative James Bush is one of them.
Oh, that's right. From South Florida, yes. He was the lawmaker that State Senator Jason Pizzo, well, I can't actually use the term. Let's just say that State Senator Jason Pizzo was very taken aback by Representative Bush's support for things like the abortion bill and other things that Jason Pizzo actually publicly called Representative Bush a little blank.
Yeah.
A word that also.
A little bitch.
All right, fine.
I'm sorry.
Well,
you
won't say a word that also begins with the letter B.
Okay, well, I'll say it. And everybody knows I swear like a sailor anyway. So James Bush. I don't want to spend too much time on these legislative races because I'd like to talk big picture. But James Bush is a long time, very religious black. I don't know if he's a pastor. But he's very deeply religious, and he has been in the legislature 3 different times.
Right. This is not his first rodeo.
And he has a long history of siding with Republicans on social issues like abortion and school prayer and school choice. So let's just leave it at that. 2 other Democratic members, McCurdy and Daisy Morales also lost. And I'm not sure what the outcome was of the Federhoff and Webster Barnaby race.
I believe that is going to a recount because the final result was so close.
Okay. So let's stop with the state house there and tell me what you think. I think that how much you think that Florida's new maps that were congressional maps were proposed by Governor DeSantis for the first time. He actually offered a congressional map to the legislature, vetoed their map or threatened to veto their map. He weighed in, he totally big-footed the legislature on drawing new maps for Congress. And this new map, I say maps because I think of each district, but it is a map. Mm-hmm. This new map gives the Republicans I think it's expected to give them from a 16-member edge to a 20-member edge in Congress, and we also, because of population growth, we will now have 28. Our Florida delegation will have 28 members. We'll be right back with City and State Florida Editor-in-Chief, Jim Rosica.
Here at Deeper Dive, we want to hear from you, the listeners. We invite you to send your questions, comments, and feedback to our mailbag. You can reach us at deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. That's deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. Get your 2 cents in by sending us an email.
Welcome back to A Deeper Dive with Dara.
So speaking of disabusing people of things, can we now disabuse people of the notion that Florida is still a purple state?
No, I just saw another story. Today, I saw a story like 2020 will decide if Florida's still, 2022 will decide whether Florida's still a swing state. And I'm thinking, you national people are so, you have no clue. Florida is not a purple state, and it is not a swing state. I mean, I'm sorry. I feel really strongly about that. Can you tell? Once
again, the boss has remade the state the way that he had originally aimed to do it. He pushed through. He shouldered through the congressional redistricting map. Let us not forget, he also got very involved in local school board races.
Yes.
Didn't make, if I remember correctly, didn't make a single congressional endorsement, but got into the tussle of local school board races and came out with a list of who his people were.
And almost all of them won.
And I think 25 out of 30 won.
Yeah.
So again, It ain't a purple state anymore.
No, it's not. And those school board races, we need to devote a whole hour to a whole podcast to the school board races, because the reshaping of the school boards is really to get conservatives on those school boards. They want to take control of the school boards. I think he even said that they want Republicans to control the school boards because they want to get rid of the woke, I'm using air quotes, woke ideology, which the governor and his like-minded folks believe is taking place in schools. And it's a state now where we have a teacher shortage of, I think, 9,000 teachers statewide. So there's a lot of drama going on in the schoolroom, and Governor DeSantis is mixing it up. Let's say that. I think redistricting played a role in what we see with some of the incumbents facing challengers, or some of the new folks who are going to Washington, but also in Congress. But also, it seems to me like Florida we used to say Florida was 3 states. There was south of the I-4, and then there was like the I-4 corridor from Tampa Bay over to the East Coast in Volusia. And then there was North Florida, everything north of I-4. I'm not sure that's the case anymore. I kind of feel like Florida we have 5 states, or we've got pockets. Does that kind of Florida, geographically we're so large, but is that play into it now, or is it just really the structure of the districts?
I would say politically, obviously Leon County is still very blue. Orlando, there's a pocket of Orlando, obviously, that is very blue, which elects people like Maxwell Frost and Anna Escamani and Carlos G. Smith. And then, of course, that the blue thread that runs through South Florida that just elected Democrat Jared Moskowitz to Congress, that reelected for, I think, the 10th time, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who has been in elected office, I believe, since she was 26 years of age.
She was in the state legislature.
And
Very
was
divisive character.
state house, state senate, and then has been in Congress, and we should mention formerly the chair of the Democratic National Committee. Got into a little bit of trouble there. We'll skip over that. But I think what you need to here's what I will do. I will read to you the last part. City and State Florida did our own takeaways column, takeaways after the primary election. We spoke to Evan Power, who is the Leon County Republican Party chair. He's also what's called in a title that still kind of bemuses me, the chair of chairs.
I love it.
The chair of all the Republican Party county chairs. So he has a leadership position in Florida GOP. And what he told us was, what you're seeing is a group of voters being pulled further further in, really, to the conservative movement. And I brought up with him, I actually talked to him for the story, and I brought up with him that, you know, there were some very conservative candidates like Anna Paulina Luna who won, but Kelly Stargell didn't, Anthony Sabatini didn't. And he said some people think it's a mixed bag, but I would say conservative candidates are now winning, and they're going to move the Republican Party further right. I think that's a good thing. What I hear when I go county by county talking to people is people want Republican leaders, conservative leaders who are willing to fight, and we're getting some of those people for the first time, unquote.
And how do you give us your analysis of that?
Well, and so, again, this is, you know, whether you agree or disagree, this is the DeSantis program. And Evan brought up, you know, the fact that this is Governor DeSantis's program, and the people who are getting elected are, you know, DeSantis, what do you want to call them? Acolytes, supporters, loyalists. That's fine. But, you know, this is really what we're seeing is really on all political levels. We've mentioned Congress, we've mentioned school board.
City commission
pretty soon.
Right.
You know, we're seeing the remaking of Florida politically under the gaze of Ron DeSantis, and it's really amazing the amount of power and influence that he is wielding to remake the state politically in his image.
He's really sort of this he came along really at a perfect moment in time alongside President Trump. You know, President Trump endorsed him. President Trump claims to have made him, and he was not the establishment candidate when he ran in the Republican gubernatorial primary 4 years ago. So he really has harnessed this Republican energy, this conservative energy, this movement that, like Evan said, that is shifting far, far to the right, that has seen many moderate conservatives now, folks that you and I 10 years ago would never dreamed in 100 years of calling moderates, have now been, you know, castigated by their own parties and either have left willingly or been chased out. I mean, John McCain, for one, is like being viewed as somebody who was too not conservative enough. So it's sort of amazing to watch this in real time unfold over many years. It on the other side, on the Democratic side, is the same thing happening? Is that I mean, it seems as though if Florida is electing Charlie Crist, and these are Democrats because we have closed primaries, so
Correct.
Democrats are electing Charlie Crist as who they want to be their next governor, or at least who they want to be on the ticket in November. He is someone who was a Republican, who was at one time called Chain Gang Charlie, and his own moniker.
Fair point.
On his, it was tough on crime, tough on gun control, and kind of he evolved as a politician because as a populist, He did what he thought was, he tried to take the temperature of the crowd, and sometimes that worked for him. It lost for him in a couple of statewide races. But that doesn't seem to me that the Democratic Party writ large is pivoting to the left in the way that Republican candidates are.
Well, let me hit pause and rewind on one thing. When you talk about DeSantis after the Trump endorsement getting elected, he was not the establishment candidate. Guess who else was not the establishment candidate? Rick Scott in 2010.
Rick Scott wrote a check to his own campaign for $50 million.
And that's fine.
So
but my point is, did Rick Scott politically remake the state as much in one term as Ron DeSantis has?
No, but
has Rick Scott
was not concurrent with, he was not in tandem with this phenomenon, this Trump phenomenon. Trump changed politics nationally in a way that DeSantis, who was very close with him, or was an ally of his at least, was, like I say, he harnessed that. He was part of that. He hitched his wagon to that Trump movement. Scott did not. And you're right.
Because there was none to hitch his wagon to at that point.
You're right. So I think that we're in a different political climate now than we were when Scott was elected.
Well, absolutely. And look at this. Look at these two counter examples. When Rick Scott tried to get rid of the FDLE commissioner, and we all went down to Tampa, and there was a whole Sturm und Drang about, and that was when the governor and cabinet were all Republicans, and we had this Sturm und Drang about, that Rick Scott, even though we didn't admit this, he did kind of unilaterally decide that the FDLE commissioner had to go, and that wasn't right. And we had the big parade in Tampa. We had a cabinet meeting in Tampa where we had to come up with a way to, here's how we're going to hire. Here's how we're going to hire FDLE commissioners going forward. Here's how we're going to get rid of FDLE commissioners going forward. Can you imagine a Ron DeSantis having to go through that? Absolutely, absolutely.
No. Like I said, he's a Bigfoot.
Absolutely not. Rather,
he's a Bigfoot, and he has consolidated and is continuing to consolidate a lot of power in the executive branch. I mentioned his role in drawing the congressional map. I mean, that's never been done before. And so he is very much consolidating power for himself, and I guess it will happen with his predecessors too, depending on who takes that office. But so what I was asked, but so we rewound then, what about the question of the right getting further right and the left is moving to the center, or moving, or static, or is Florida an outlier there again?
All I can tell you about that is, and I'll bring up these names again, we are seeing a progressive power base, as much as you want to call it a power base, of candidates, of electeds like, and again, an Anna Eskamani, a Carlos G. Smith, now a Maxwell Frost, and there are others, but do they wield anywhere near the amount of power that the majority does? Absolutely not. But they're good at getting attention paid to the issues that they want attention paid to. But in terms of the exercise of naked political power, that's obviously just not happening because the numbers aren't there for them.
It's interesting to note that you mentioned Anna Eskamani and Carlos Guillermo Smith, two state representatives from the Central Florida area, and both of them endorsed Charlie Crist. And I had a conversation with Anna about this, and her rationale was that, she said that, policy-wise, it was a policy-centric decision, but she also did acknowledge that she did think that he has a better chance of defeating DeSantis in November. So let's talk about what's coming. What's next? What's coming up? And what do we have to look for over the next couple of months? And first, I mean, maybe we should just start. Does Charlie stand a chance in heck of winning in November?
My gut tells me no. Modern American political history tells me don't make any bets. But, probably at the end of the day, I'm going to go with my gut on this. But, that's not to say that Charlie's going to make it easy for Ron. But I just, again, going back to the fact that the reality is we're really not a swing state anymore. We're not a purple state anymore. And if it's a red state, then,
yeah,
you can guess who's going to get elected by and large.
I mean, I'll bet you dinner at your favorite restaurant in Tallahassee that Ron DeSantis is our next governor.
And I think you're 99.
You're not going to take that bet.
No, I think you're 99.8% right.
Yeah. So what are you going to be watching over the next 3 months? What's going to be top of mind for you before November?
In terms of what the campaign issues are going to be?
Yes.
I mean, I have to assume it's going to be more of the same. What new under the sun can we plow at this point?
Right. Okay, well, listen, it's always a pleasure having Jim Rosica, my colleague across the hall, in the terracotta room with us today, talking about the results of the August 23rd primary election. Jim Rosica, editor-in-chief of City and State Florida. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And of course, I have to give a plug to you and me. Remember to, if you haven't already, sign up for the City and State Florida newsletter, First Read Florida. You can go to cityandstatefl.com/newsletters to sign up. And of course, if you are not a subscriber to the News Service of Florida, you probably should be.
Absolutely should be. Not
so,
probably.
Go to newsserviceflorida, one word, .com and poke around the site. Specifically, you should go to newsserviceflorida.com/trials. And you can go there and request a free 10-day trial of the news service by submitting the online form on that webpage.
This
so
is
go
why
there and check
he's
it
an
out.
editor and I'm just a lowly whatever I am.
Don't stop underselling and
Stop.
besmirching yourself.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jim. Jim and I will be doing this, teaming up here on the podcast once a month. So thanks for joining in today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, and we'll see you in a month.
A Deeper Dive with Dara is a podcast by City and State Florida, hosted by Dara Kam, produced by Ryan Daly, and music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs, LLC, and performed by Ryan Daly and Danny Reyes.